All right, so let's get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. Why you really need to go cloud native during the pandemic. I am glad to see that so many of you joined, and I think it's been crazy months for all of us. And now we slowly need to find our way back to a new normal, even if the old normal feels very, very far away. I will keep this introduction very, very short. First of all, we will record this meeting, so in case you need to drop out early, no worries, we will send you an email with the recording in the coming days. This is the first important thing. The second important thing, we have a short Q&A session after the webinar. So if you have questions, you can ask them there, or of course, just post them in the chat window, and then you can answer them either straight away or then again in the Q&A session. That's the organizational stuff. We have two speakers tonight, Sebastian, our CEO, and Bill, our Kubernetes advocate. And with that, I already want to hand over to Sebastian and hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Christine, and welcome everyone to this webinar. And as Christine said, we want to talk today about why we think it's now the time to go cloud native, especially with this challenging times. So let's first do a quick introduction. I'm Sebastian Scheele, co-founder and CEO of Cubermatic. We are a company based out of Hamburg. And with me in the call is Bill. Bill, do you quickly want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Bill Mulligan, and I'm a Kubernetes advocate at Lutz, and I help companies discover if Kubernetes is right for them.
Perfect. And now let's directly jump into the topic. So, yeah, we know all now the situation, and we think like COVID-19 is one of the biggest leadership tests which are now arrived. So it's really about, we need to think about how to bring our now distributed workforce back to innovation, how we build and really execute with this remotely challenge, and really focusing on quality and speed. And also how can we recover the business in this unpredictable situation, and where we don't know where it's going, and how can we really manage this in an efficient way. So, but I think it's also the time to really see this as an opportunity. I think we should really start off reviewing the current situation and understanding the impact, and also identify the changes and priorities, and then really working on these changes. I can say for myself, of course, as a founder and a manager of such an organization, we had the same problems, or we had similar problems. The good thing was also, the good thing in our case was we were a remote company before Corona. We now a remote company after Corona, but we had other areas where we heavily impacted. For example, running a conference, container days, every year, and now this year, first of all, we needed to postpone it to next year, but also this had impact on how our marketing is working. And so how can we change this? How can we improve this? And I think cloud native can really help there on that way. But first, let's have a look on what we can already see. Now, COVID-19 is out there roughly a half a year, a bit less. But I think there are already patterns we can see what is working and potentially what is not working. First, let's have a look in what is working. So what we are seeing, who is less impacted? We see companies like Zoom, who are their revenue grows over 160% during a quarter. Microsoft with their Teams solution, they had like over 65 million people who are using it in a single day. And a lot of other companies like Netflix, Facebook, but also companies like Delivery Hero, where they help now, or where the business model were perfectly fitting with delivering food to everyone. And when we're looking into the stock prices, Amazon is on an all-time high currently. And so what we see here is really what companies are less impacted were really the big tech companies or the tech companies because they had a business model which is working also in this kind of situation. And so what can we learn from this? And potentially, even if we are not a tech company, what things can be adapted so that things can be improved also on the normal business? And I think one important area of COVID-19 is the whole remote working. So now for a long time, or for some time, a lot of people work from remote. And I think it's clear remote working is there, it will stay. Even if we later go back, at some portion, people will further work remotely. I think in most cases, we are not going 100% back into a normal work. And I think this is also true for a lot of other areas. So with Corona, there will be an impact of our whole life. And we now seeing things going differently, and it's working. And if Corona or COVID-19 is going away, so we want some parts staying. And I think from a business perspective, we cannot go there and say, okay, potentially in half a year or a year, everything will go back to pre-COVID-19 times. This is exactly what we're seeing here on the customer behavior. So COVID impacted us on a lot of different areas. It was our work environment, but it was also like the schools and the learning. Now everything is online. Communication with people. Before COVID-19, we can easily meet everyone. Now, even for private reasons, people start using Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. Traveling is currently really difficult. And for example, you're traveling only in your own country, things like this. Shopping, now it's opening up again, but a lot of us now use more and more e-commerce. The whole life at home was changed because we all stayed much more time at home. And also, of course, the health was impacted. So this already changed our behavior. And it was really a radical change. But what we think about, when we think about it, I don't think it will go back 100% what it was before. Some of the things will stay and will stay also forever. So we need to think about what are the changes which will have this also on long-term perspective on our business. So let's think about how we can restart now. I think, first of all, we should really focusing on concentrate on our revenue. So how we can help increase our sales revenue, but also focusing on our customer experience, how we can help on demand generation, how we can use our marketing more efficient. For example, if you were before going to a lot of conferences and trade shows, now a lot of companies doing it online, and it's much more data driven. And so this has an impact of the organization, and much more data driven approaches are coming up more and more. And so how this can help us and what impact does it have on our processes, but also how we need to educate our employees to go that way. And all this then goes down really on focusing on digital transformation. So really setting up digital tooling to improve our efficiency and growth, so that we can also deploy hardware and software for our remote worker and the required tooling in the cloud or in our data center, so that we can mitigate the risk that every time someone needs to be personal there, and potentially if the next crisis is coming up, that we are prepared. And we can really identify end-to-end processes and try to re-engineer them with a much more focus in mind, that we use digitalization for this. And with the changes we see on our customer behavior, I think it's really important to be customer-centric, so that we really identify what are the changes our consumers and customers will do and are doing already in their behavior, and what behavior of this will stay, and what potentially will go back before, so that if we now start changing and thinking about how to improve, we are not now changing a process and in half a year potentially it's completely back to normal, and we did a big change and then we need to do the next change to get it back. Potentially identify the critical path where we immediately need to improve, which brings us value, and other things where we say, okay, it's okay when it runs half a year or a year this way, and then we're thinking it's going the way as it was before. So that we can really build processes and structures which can retain and provide services to our customer with, in a current situation, limited physical interaction, in the future potentially with a bit of more, but really focusing on what they want and what's their behavior also in the future. And one of the challenges, what we're seeing there to go that way is, when we're looking into IT budgets, a lot of the budget is going into maintenance of our existing portfolio, and only roughly 30% is going into innovation. So we need to think about how can we free up our most talented people and engineers to really work on innovations instead of spending so much time of maintaining the status quo. And because we think this behavior, what we currently have, is really driving to a cycle of inefficiency. So it starts with like, we have poor developer efficiency. So it takes quite some time to get your developers productive. If a new developer starts, he needs 1 or 2 months to really start coding, for example. We have slow release cycles. Potentially, we only release once a quarter. If we have those kind of release cycles, like during the 6 months of COVID-19, we would only be able at max to release 2 releases. And as we put a lot of changes then into 1 release, it also creates unstable products, because we're putting so much new features there which weren't tested, so we can't ensure all the changes are working properly together. And so this then leads really to weak customer experience, and so they're going potentially to other sites or to other services where they get a better experience, and at the end all this leads to really high OPEX and R&D costs. And this needs to be changed. We really need to go to a much more cycle of efficiency, so where we can really enable and use this to easily experiment and try approaches, do a quick idea, get it into production, see if this is working, and then we can continue. And when we see it's not working, we can really go to another idea and don't continue and wasting time. And so what we really need is like really high efficiency developers. It should be easy to get them to production. If a new person started, like in 1 or 2 days, he should be ready to go and have all the access, have, even if he starts completely remote, he can get everything set it up. And then we have want to have fast release cycles that we, in best case, can deploy every hour or every day, as much as we need it, so that we can individually ship features to the customer and can try it out. This, on the one side, creates the assurance that we can see how features are working, and then also creates much more stable products. And with this, we're creating much higher and better customer experience, and at the end all this lowers down the cost we need to invest and lowers the OPEX and R&D costs. And we see this transformation is possible. These are some numbers where this happens. I know you all are aware with the lockdown of the schools that the educational institutes needed to change, and so these are some industry examples. For example, they changed to homeschooling and use video conferences, and you see that the downloads of the video conferences was increasingly quite heavily. And I think depending on if it's like a private school or a public school and what tooling they had. Some were faster on this and others were slowly on this. Other areas like, for example, retail. So they close, their retail stores were closed. And yeah, you need to have another way to go there. And first of all, think about what is the way, for example, if you have retail stores, could you use online influencers and using online sales to increase this? And there are possibilities for these changes. But of course, all this needs a specific kind of also underlying infrastructure to do this, to go this fast way. And so digital transformations requires a complete different development speed and investment. So we cannot do this as in the old ways with a slow speed. We need to think in a complete different, much more agile way how to do this. And one thing what we are also seeing is like simply adapting cloud and or Kubernetes is not enough. So if you say, okay, now I'm running it on the cloud, putting my VMs one-to-one in the cloud, you're not gaining this efficiency you want to go. You really need to think about how do I re-engineer and change my application, and similar to Kubernetes, if you're putting things that way, you need to think about how this can really leveraging and provides me flexibility. And if you're looking into how other innovative leaders are doing it, quite often it really starts with they really go all into cloud native adoption. In some cases, they use a single cloud. In a lot of cases, especially if they are multinational enterprises, you have the requirements to use multiple clouds, to use on-prem and have a lot of different places where you need to deploy, and then leveraging automation to really gain this efficiency from the development to the operation. So as more and more you automate in the processes, as more and more you can gain efficiency, and as earlier you find problems in your whole tool chain and deployment process, because if everything is automated, if something is not working, it creates an error and you realize it, and so you are able to fix this. And so with this, you are able to bring better products to the market, reduce the OPEX and R&D costs, and of course also be more attractive for new talents on the engineering side. And with this, I want to hand over to Bill, who will really go into a business case, how Cloud Native can help you on that way.
Sure, thanks, Sebastian. Let me share my screen really quickly. So now that Sebastian has given us all the buzzwords to talk about this with to the management, and I want to dive down to a little bit more of the nitty-gritty details and like the dollars and cents behind building a business case that'll actually prove a return on investment of turning towards Kubernetes and other cloud native technologies. And so the question is, should we go cloud native or not? What kind of return on investment will we actually have by investing in these new technologies? We can say a lot of things, but what is the actual dollars and cents calculation that I could present to a manager, to the executive, to the board, that will actually like help them decide whether it's worth it or not? And so the example that I'm going to be going through today is looking at, should we run legacy applications in VMs, or should we run cloud native applications running containers on Kubernetes? And so what we're doing is just like a typical enterprise. They're running lots of different services to provide different types of applications to the various customers. And they're trying to decide if they should stick with their current VM-based architecture or move towards a more modern cloud native approach by running their application in containers on Kubernetes. And so Enterprise X has right now about 100 different applications that they're running for their customers, running on about 200 different servers. They need about 10 people to operate this, and each of these applications experience about eight hours of outages per year, and has like 10 developers on it. So if we dive into this a little bit more, I'm going to kind of talk about the assumptions behind like each of the numbers that we have in our thing, and then kind of sum it up into a final infographic about like how we can actually look at what the total cost saving is. So if we go into the actual assumptions right now, we can say one of the problems with running like legacy type applications is actually the server utilization in data centers. In a lot of cases, it's super low, only between like 7 to 15% of the actual server capacity is actually being used. This is caused by server over provisioning, not really sure what's going on, or just not handing back resources or not having an efficient way to manage your whole environment. Now, the great thing with containers and with Kubernetes is we can have much higher bin packing into these clusters and onto your servers. In some of the case studies from the CNCF, we can actually even see utilization rates from like 90 to 95%. In our assumption in this calculator, we're going to go a little bit lower than that. Not everybody's perfect. So we're going to go with 70%. And our server pricing is based on AWS instances based in Frankfurt. In terms of outages and availability, obviously this is super important. If your customers in COVID times can only access your application through an online portal, how is it going to be offline? And how long is it going to be offline is actually a super important consideration, because during that whole time, your customers cannot buy from you. You don't have any revenue coming in. And so our assumption is like 8 hours per year. By moving to cloud native technologies that have these self-healing capabilities built into them, some companies have been able to reduce their mean time to recovery from 45 minutes to less than 5 minutes. So if we look at the total outage in hours, it's the like total time per application multiplied by the number of applications. Now, the assumption that we're going to have here is each outage costs us €1,000, which is obviously on the low end, especially if you're running like a very large or very mission critical instance. I know for some companies, it can be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands every time there's an outage, but we're going to go on the low end just so we don't, kind of create crazy eye-popping numbers just right out of the box. But I think you'll still be surprised. The next thing is, what are our like actual operations team and the developers actually cost us? Because as you know, like the largest cost center for actually most company is not any of their product services. It's actually the people themselves. The people are actually what we're investing the most money into. And so how can we make sure we use their time most efficiently to get the most benefit out of their time? And so the assumptions that we have here is for the operator SRE or sysadmin team, salary from Glassdoor is $80K per year. And with the automation of Kubernetes and cloud native technologies, they can put in like 50% time. So it's saving them 50% of their time so that they can focus on other things. The developers, average salary from Glassdoor is $110K per year. And we can increase developer productivity by 20%. And this is pulled from also one of the case studies from the CNCF. And so now if we look at the total cost of ownership between these, if we compare running our applications in VMs in a legacy infrastructure versus running our applications in containers on Kubernetes, what we can actually find is actually quite a significant difference. So over 3 years, this example enterprise is saving almost $7 million. And that comes out in a variety of different ways. This isn't, the great thing about cloud native technologies is it's not just affecting one business metric, it's actually helping you improve business metrics on all different sides in terms of server utilization, people's time utilization, availability, reducing outages. Cloud native technologies can help us improve our key business KPIs on all of these different fronts. And so it's great to be able to demonstrate this in actual numbers that you can take to an executive board. And so one thing that I want to show is this is actually something that you can work and you can play around with. So if you go to our website after this webinar, you can download this ROI calculator. You can actually put in your own numbers. You can say how many applications you have, how many servers, how big each of those servers are, how big your team is in terms of operators and developers, and how many outages you have per year. And at the end of this, our handy little table here will go out and calculate it for each year, do a comparison of running it in VMs versus running it on Kubernetes, and give you a total cost savings across all the years that you're looking at. And then once again, like some handy like graphs and metrics that you can just take, drop into a PowerPoint that's going right to an executive team, and there you go. You have your business case built for your executive team. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Sebastian to close it out.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think we're coming now to the Q&A. So do we have any questions?
All right. Seems no. Now there's a question coming in. No, it's just I know it's not the meta, but so waiting for your question.
So Quentin, do you? So the first question that we have is, what about app migration? How would that be started to move into Kubernetes? Sebastian, do you want to take this one or should I?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah, I think the app migration is a really interesting part. And we definitely should do a dedicated webinar about this, because there are a lot of different approaches you can do. One is like a classical lift and shift, but also some re-engineering. I think it really depends on what application you want to move and how close it is already cloud native. So what languages is it using? What is the effort? I think there's not like the one-way fit, but that's also the reason why we think KubeVirt is a quite interesting approach, so that you can run containerized workloads and VM workloads side by side, so that you don't need to move everything at the same time. You can still leave your stuff in containers and later moving it into that way.
Great, thanks. And then the second one, Sebastian, do you want to take? What about the Scrum transition from vCycle with distant working?
Yeah, I mean, we can all talk a bit about our experience. I think it's important, especially with like distance working, is that you don't have like a team which is sitting all at the same office, and then you have a few people who are like a satellite. If all having the same challenge and like seeing, okay, documenting and writing is required, because that everyone understands this, and using modern tools like Microsoft Teams, Slack, things like this can really help to drive this and push this forward. And if everyone having the same challenge and see, okay, if I'm not using a good microphone, it don't everyone have a problem to understand me. Everyone tries to optimize and see, okay, I want to help also in that way. And so I think it's a hard challenge to go that way. But I think also with remote, it can work quite well. We see this on some examples. We can see this inside of our organization, but I think one really good example for this is also in general the whole cloud native development or the Kubernetes project. It's a complete distributed project, and mostly no one not one big team is sitting at a big location. It's distributed work across a lot of companies, and it's quite successful.
Great, thanks. This next one is, thanks for the impressive input. Can you give an overview of your offerings? So maybe I can jump in there. First of all, if you have any like questions, or if you miss anything, because I'm just like talking through them right now, you can always go to our website after this. It's Kubermatic.com. And there you can find both our product offerings and our professional services offerings. So on the two different sides that we have is, one is on the professional services side in both training and consulting engagements. So we're actually one of the world's leading experts in Kubernetes. We're the top 5 corporate contributor to the project in the world. So we have really deep expertise in the cloud native ecosystem. And in addition to that, we're a certified partner from the Linux Foundation for both Kubernetes trainings and providing services too. And so kind of we run the spectrum there from the first introduction to containers to a operator engineering accelerator. So looking at automating the operations of your applications on Kubernetes. So everything from upskilling your team to having the first consulting engagements, looking at like how you should architect the best practices and blueprints that you can have for your cloud native architectures, to actually implementing them in production. The places that I would actually recommend to start if you're just getting started on your journey is, we have 2 of them called Cloud Native Explore and Cloud Native Design. And these are half-day or 2-day workshops to like dive into kind of the basics around setting up a roadmap, where you currently are, where you'd like to go, and what kind of metrics you'd like to improve. And so this can help you provide kind of a roadmap, and we can help you set up this ROI calculator for your own individual requirements there. And with this, we'll be able to look at what training requirements you have, what consulting requirements you have, and which tools would be the best to fit into your environment. On top of that, we also have 2 software products that help automate the lifecycle management of your Kubernetes clusters. So in the assumption that I was having here, Kubernetes takes away 50% of the work. Well, our software tools, Kube1 and Kubernetes Platform, can help really automate away a lot of the daily tasks for your teams, reducing it, I'd say, like, I mean, the sales answer would be like 90%. But we really do have customers right now running hundreds of Kubernetes clusters in production with just 1 engineer to run them. Whereas in traditional cases, this would take teams of 10, 20, 30 engineers to be able to do a similar thing. And so if you want to learn more about those products, feel free to contact me after this. I'll put up my contact info, or check out our website.
Yes, the next question is, can the Cubermatic platform works across data center hypervisors like VMware, as well as the public clouds? Do you want, or should I?
Sure, I can do it. Yeah, so the great thing about the Kubernetes platform is it helps you provide automated multi-cloud operations wherever you need it to go. So it does work across a variety of different data center hypervisors, including VMware, OpenStack, Bare Metal, and a variety of different public clouds. So including Google Cloud, AWS, Azure, Alibaba Cloud, Packet, Linode, Hetzner, and the ability to integrate more as they're needed is something that we can help do in a consulting engagement too. So the next one is looking at the German Mittelstand with small IT departments still in the Stone Age and mostly external software providers. How can Kubermatic help me educate them about the necessity of this move? The calculator you presented might not apply.
I mean, that's exactly one thing I think where we really want to educate and help you people. It's not like that we see us as a classical consulting company. We take over all the tasks. Our task was, especially our trainings and accelerators, enable your team and enable your people to get involved in this, getting learnings with this, and we can help them in specific situations where they say, I want to have the experts on this. So we have this kinds of accelerators for different areas, for example, for application development. Others are more operational side. And of course, we can also work with your providers together. You are working on, I think on like software, which you are buying, it really depends on where they are and if they're already providing this and licenses for containerized workloads. But in general, there is already a lot of possibilities, and where we really want to help already in the past a lot of companies to really start on this journey and getting the first steps on that way.
Cool, great. The next one from Amir. From a partner perspective, is Cubermatic more geared up for national organizations or enterprise more? Do you have case studies on UK insurance companies?
We are focusing fully on, in general, we are generic on this side. So we're working with a lot of enterprises which using our software, but also like cloud providers using us. For example, this 11 using us for the MetaCube offering. Telco operators are using us. So it really depends on the use case, what we really want to enable and help our customers, how they can run and manage their workload containerized on top of Kubernetes. On use cases, we have a lot of different use cases, not directly UK insurance company use case, but for a German company insurance, we can provide you some more details. Happy to catch up on this afterwards.
All right. Yeah, more questions. Regarding to the trainings, is there any special certification track or training for Cubermatic? Should work open Kubernetes Training CKA or CKAD, for example, or is there any specific training?
We're currently building up a more dedicated, or we have a dedicated training for Cubermatic already. I mean, the foundation and what's already good is if you know Kubernetes, because at the end, when we started the development, we were really thinking about what's the best platform to develop and manage Kubernetes cluster. And we came up with the idea, currently leveraging Kubernetes. And if you know how to manage an application on top of Kubernetes, it's quite easy to understand and manage Kubermatic as well. But of course, we have some more detailed training where it shows more all the bits and bytes, going more into deep. Yeah, happy to provide more information.
Yeah, so that's maybe diving into the trainings part of our website if you want more details there. Also, I'm happy to chat with you if you're interested.
And one more question. Yeah, really an engaged discussion. There's a great deal of confusion over whether going cloud does actually save on IT budgets or not. What is your experience and opinion on this in general?
I mean, that's exactly the slide. I'm saying, okay, only going to the cloud or only going to Kubernetes is not the right way. So if you're seeing or working on the cloud as you do it in the traditional data center, it's definitely not saving you money. It's even cost you a lot of money. So we had a customer, they were running like a VMware infrastructure and wanted to move this to the cloud. And at the end, it was machines who were running test workloads, and they were running all the time, but were used only a few hours per month. And they wanted to move it exactly one-to-one in the cloud. And then they did the calculation. If they do the one-to-one migration, it was so expensive. But we were discussing with them, hey, do you really need to do this? Or do we need to think about new approaches? Why is this VM running 24 hours? You only needed a few hours per month. Can we not build tooling around that it's running, it's automatically shut down when it's not required and only running when it's really required, so that you automatically can start this and shut it down? And so after this, it was cheaper because you really only spend the money for the execution time and not like for the idle time. But it really needs another thinking and another way how to do this, instead of saying, okay, yeah, I'm going into cloud or I'm going into Kubernetes, and now I have all the flexibility, all my cost problems are solved. I think that's definitely not the right approach.
And adding to that, what cloud optimization tools do you offer to save on operating costs in cloud? How do you advise customers to improve their environments?
We by our own don't have optimization tools so that it's really analyzing it, but we're working there with partners and can point you to the right partners depending on your use case. I think on the advice to customer, it really depends on what the customer is doing. So typically in a workshop, we can figure out what's the current situation, where the customer wants to go. Is it really cost saving? Is it like more flexibility on the development or operational environment? And then advising on what is the best tooling, what are the best ways forward.
All right. Any more questions?
One more question. Is Kubernetes oriented for no ops? So the platform itself does have some operations involved. However, we can provide a fully managed environment for you, so it can be a completely no ops platform.
Okay. I can't see any more questions. Last chance. If not, then Sebastian, could you just go to the very last slide and share again?
Yes.
Yeah, if there are no open questions, I really thank you a lot for joining today's session and for asking so many maybe it's about the agenda of a typical workshop. We will maybe answer that later on. I think Bill is happy to take over. Yeah, thanks all for joining and asking so many questions and being so engaged and interested. I want to end with, if you are already a bit more advanced with Kubernetes, then we would very much like to see you again for the 6th part of our Kubernetes 101 webinar series, Keeping the State of Apps. In case this is already too advanced, we have a resource page on our website, and there you can also find part 1 to 5, which really start with the theoretical foundations of containers and Kubernetes, so you can get started rather easily. And then, of course, if you have more questions, then there are many, many different channels to reach us. We have the marketing@Cubermatic.com. We have our Twitter channel. We are on GitHub. You can check out our website and leave us a message there. So yeah, just feel free to reach out. And that is it. Thanks again, Sebastian and Bill, for speaking. Thanks everyone for joining. And then I hope to see you again pretty soon. Have a nice evening and bye.